Reva Coyle didn't come back for him. She came because the doctor in Savannah had looked at the ultrasound screen and said the words pulmonary stenosis with the same flat tone people use to order sandwiches, and then handed her a consent form that required 2 signatures. Only one of those signatures lived at the end of Coral Ridge Drive in Miami. She'd taken the overnight bus because she couldn't afford a flight. 31 hours with her feet swelling in her sneakers, and a granola bar from the Atlanta vending machine standing in for dinner. She'd arrived at the Miami station at 7 in the morning with a manila folder pressed against her chest like a shield, and spent $40 she didn't have on a cab whose driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror with the particular expression of a man who wanted to ask something he wasn't going to ask. She was 32 weeks pregnant. It was impossible to pretend otherwise. The cab slowed at the bottom of Coral Ridge Drive. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. "I can't take you up there," he said, not apologetically, just fact. Reva already had her door open. "You just did." The gate was black iron, 12 feet tall, flanked by stone pillars with cameras set into the mortar at angles that covered every approach. Reva had spent 18 months cataloging the security infrastructure of this compound because it had been her job. She knew about the blind spot at the southeast corner where the jasmine grew too thick to trim. She knew the guard on the left was named Curtis and kept peppermints in his jacket pocket. Curtis wasn't in the booth. The man who stepped out was young and broad and did not know her name. "Private property," he said, and then his eyes dropped, and his whole posture recalibrated the way men's postures always did, the involuntary softening, the instinct older than training. "Ma'am, are you?" "Tell Straker that Reva is at the gate." She kept her voice level. The folder was getting damp from her hands. "Tell him I have papers that require his signature. 30 minutes, then I'm gone." The guard's face flickered. He knew the name. She could see it. The flash of recognition, the quick recalibration, the hand going to his earpiece. He turned away, murmuring fast into the mic. Reva waited. The baby shifted against her ribs, a slow rolling pressure that had become the background music of her life for the past 3 months. She pressed one hand to the side of her stomach. Not comfort. More like a reminder, this is what we came for. 1 signature, then we leave. The gate opened. Lev was standing on the front steps. He was Nash Straker's right hand, his logistics coordinator, and the only man in the organization who had ever treated Reva like a person rather than an accessory. He had once driven her to the emergency room at 2 in the morning when she'd gotten food poisoning, sat in the waiting room 4 hours without being asked. He was looking at her now like she was a ghost, a very pregnant ghost. "Reva," her name came out of him like a punch had landed. "What?" "I need to see him." She climbed the steps one at a time, hand on the iron railing, because her center of gravity had been somebody else's decision for the past 7 months. "I have a consent form. Medical. His signature is required. I'm not here for anything else." Lev's eyes tracked between her face and her stomach, with the helpless repetition of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. He doesn't know. Obviously. She reached the top step. Her lower back was a sustained, grinding complaint. "Open the door, Lev." He opened it. The study was at the end of the east corridor, past the saltwater aquarium Straker had installed, because someone told him it reduced blood pressure, and past the framed shipping manifests that looked like art but were actually coded accounts. Reva had walked this hallway every day for 2 years. She knew its moods, the quality of silence when Straker was in a meeting versus alone, the particular weight in the air before something bad happened. She'd been very good at her job, too good in the end. She didn't knock. Nash Straker was standing at the window when she pushed the door open, not sitting at his desk. His back was to her. Dark charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a glass of something amber in one hand, staring out at the Biscayne Bay view that had cost him $11 million and was, she knew, the only thing in this building he actually loved. He turned at the sound of the door. She watched the sequence move across his face. Recognition first, immediate, like a fuse catching. Then something that was not quite relief and not quite rage, but contained elements of both, burning through the careful control he wore like a second skin. His eyes were the same dark grey she remembered, the color of storm water over concrete, and for one moment they were entirely unguarded. Then they dropped. The glass stopped moving, just stopped, suspended halfway in the arc of being set down on the credenza, and Nash Straker went absolutely still in the way that men like him went still. Not the stillness of peace, the stillness of a system rerouting around damage it wasn't designed to sustain. The glass made contact with the credenza. The sound was very small in the quiet room. Reva, his voice was low, uninflected. She'd always found it the most dangerous register he had, not the raised voice, not the command. This, the word stripped of everything except the fact of it. I brought paperwork. She held up the manila folder. Her hand was steady. She was proud of that. Consent form. There's a procedure the baby needs, and the hospital requires both biological parents to sign before they'll schedule. I need your signature on page 3. She paused. That's all I need. Straker looked at the folder. He looked at her stomach. He looked at her face. How far? He said. 32 weeks. The muscle in his jaw moved. She watched him do the arithmetic she had done for 7 months, the math of calendars and departure dates, and the specific silence of a test result that changes everything. Sit down, he said. I'm fine standing. Reva, her name again, waited differently now. Not a command. Something she didn't have a word for and didn't want to examine. Sit down. She sat. The leather chair by the fireplace was the same one she'd spent hundreds of hours in, working through his accounts with a laptop balanced on her knees, building the financial architecture of an empire she had believed in, because she had believed in the man who ran it, before she'd found the discrepancy, before she'd understood what it meant. Straker moved to his desk, picked up his phone, said 2 words into it, set it down, came back and crossed his arms and looked at her with the expression of a man methodically dismantling himself in private. What procedure? He said. Pulmonary valve stenosis, a narrowing of the valve in the heart. It's correctable. The success rate is very high, but it has to be done within the first week after birth, or there are complications. She recited it the way she'd recited it to herself every night for 3 weeks, until the words stopped meaning anything and became just sounds. The hospital has a pediatric cardiology team. They're excellent, but they need both parents documented and consenting before delivery. I have 3 weeks before my due date. Who's been monitoring you? A clinic in Savannah. A clinic. The 2 words fell out with a particular flatness. It's a good clinic. You've been managing a high-risk pregnancy in a... It's not high risk for me, she said, cutting him off. The condition is in the baby. My health has been fine. The pregnancy has been uncomplicated. She opened the folder on her lap. I just need page 3. Straker crossed the room. He didn't take the folder. He crouched in front of her chair, which was not something Nash Straker did, because Nash Straker did not lower himself to anyone's level, physically or otherwise. And yet, he was crouching in front of her with his forearms braced on his knees and his face 18 inches from hers, looking at her with an expression she had never once seen on him in 2 years and could not categorize. Why did you run? He said, not a question. An excavation. Straker. You were my accounts manager. You had access to every financial record in this organization. You were the only person in this building I trusted with the real numbers. He paused. And then you disappeared. No note, no call. The apartment was empty. Your laptop was wiped. Another pause, more controlled. And you'd flagged a discrepancy in the Port Authority ledgers 3 days before you left. Reva held his gaze. You knew about the flag. I found it 6 weeks after you were gone. Something moved through his face. I found out what it meant 4 weeks after that. The room shifted around those words. Reva felt her pulse change rhythm. Harmon, she said. Straker's jaw tightened. Harmon. His logistics director, the man who had been quietly selling routing information to the Gaza network for 2 years, The man whose name appeared in a very small and very cleverly disguised way in a single line item in the Port Authority invoices. The man who had, 3 days before Reva disappeared, walked past her desk and looked at her screen for just a half-second too long. I didn't know what to do. The words had been inside her for 7 months and came out with the rough quality of something stored in bad conditions. I didn't know who else was involved. I didn't know if it was just Harmon or if it went deeper. I thought, if I brought it to you and someone else was in on it, they'd know I'd seen it. And I was. She stopped. You were pregnant, Straker said quietly. I didn't know for certain yet, but I suspected, and I thought. She pressed her hand flat against the swell of her stomach. The gesture was involuntary. If I stayed, and it went wrong, it wouldn't just be me. Straker was very still. So you ran, he said. You found evidence that someone in my organization was a traitor, and rather than come to me, you disappeared to protect a pregnancy you weren't even sure about yet. When you say it like that, I'm not criticizing it. His voice had gone very low. He exhaled, a long, controlled breath she recognized as the thing he did, instead of showing whatever he was actually feeling. Harmon is dead, has been for 4 months. The Gaza network is dissolved. The organization is clean. He held her eyes. You've been living in Savannah for 7 months for no reason. Reva said nothing. You could have come home. Home. The word landed between them like something thrown hard. She had not let herself think about this building in those terms for 7 months, because thinking about it in those terms would have made her return to it. And she had reasons not to. Good reasons. Reasons that were 32 weeks old and had a heart condition and were currently pressing on her bladder. I need page 3, she said. Dr. Beale was a compact, silver-haired woman who arrived with a portable ultrasound machine in a black case and the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to being summoned without explanation. She asked Reva 3 clinical questions and began without ceremony. Straker stood at the foot of the chaise, with his arms crossed and his face an arrangement of controlled nothing. The wand moved across the tight curve of Reva's stomach. The screen resolved from static into the familiar landscape, spine, ribs, the blurred astronomy of a face in profile. Reva had seen this image 11 times now. She knew every quadrant of it. She had lain awake in her Savannah apartment thinking about it, until it became the furniture of her interior life. She watched Straker see it for the first time. He didn't move, didn't speak. His arms uncrossed slowly, falling to his sides. He was looking at the screen with the expression of a man who has built his entire adult life on the principle that nothing can touch him, suddenly encountering the thing that touches him. Dr. Beale shifted the wand. The screen flickered. The sound came out of the speaker, rapid, rhythmic, absolutely solid. The heartbeat, fast and insistent, like something knocking hard at a door demanding to be let in. Straker's breath changed. She heard it, a small, involuntary interruption in the controlled rhythm of him. He took 1 step forward toward the screen, and then stopped himself. 152 beats per minute, Dr. Beale said, not looking up. Strong, consistent. The stenosis is visible here. She indicated a point, but current restriction is moderate. The child is compensating well. This is very manageable with timely intervention. Straker didn't look at the stenosis. He was looking at the heartbeat. The little flutter on the screen, the evidence of something working very hard at the business of existing. He sat down on the edge of the chaise. Just sat, without asking, without his usual architecture of deliberate positioning. He sat and looked at the screen, and something moved through his face that she suspected he would not have allowed if he'd known she was watching. A boy or a girl, he said to the doctor, not to Reva. I can tell you if. She doesn't know yet, Reva said quietly. Dr. Beale looked between them. I'll give you a few minutes. She left the room with her machine without being asked. The silence was different after she left, occupied. Straker was still looking at the dark screen. Were you going to tell me? He said. I told you I needed the. Not about the signature. He looked at her. the grey eyes she'd spent 2 years trying not to hold too long. If there had been no consent form, if the pregnancy had been uncomplicated, were you ever going to tell me? The question was fair. She had asked it herself, in the dark at 3 a.m, more times than she could count. I don't know, she said, because it was the truth. He nodded, a small, careful movement. Then he reached out and placed his hand, just his hand, flat and open, against the side of her stomach, not asking, not claiming, just resting there, the way you rest a hand against a wall to feel whether the building is still solid. The baby moved under his palm, a slow rolling shift. Straker closed his eyes. Reva looked at the ceiling and breathed. The envelope arrived at 11:17 that night. Lev brought it to the study with the particular expression he wore when delivering information designed to cause damage. He set it on the desk without speaking. Straker looked at it, then at Lev's face, and something passed between them that Reva, sitting by the window with a paperback Mrs. Grout had pressed on her with the energy of someone completing a religious obligation, could not fully interpret. She set the book down. Straker opened the envelope. He took out a photograph, studied it for a long moment, then set it face up on the desk and looked at Lev. When, he said. 40 minutes ago, taped to the windshield of the South Patrol vehicle. Reva got up. Straker said, "Don't," and she came to the desk anyway, because she had never in her life responded well to "don't," and looked at the photograph. It was her, taken from elevation, a roofline or a tree, showing her arriving at the front gate that morning. Profile, the pregnancy visible in precise and unmistakable outline. At the bottom, in thick black marker, the numbers woman came back. What did she bring with her? The cold hit her stomach before her brain had finished processing. The numbers woman. Her. They knew who she was. They knew she was back. And the phrasing, "What did she bring?" meant they were asking whether she'd carried something out of the organization's records. Information. Leverage. Gaza remnants, Lev said. Gaza is dissolved. Straker was already at the drawer, already moving with the particular economy of a man shifting operational modes. The Glock came out. He checked it in 3 practiced movements. They have no network left. They have individuals with grudges and time. A grudge and a high-powered camera is enough. Lev looked at Reva with something that apologized for things that weren't his fault. They'll want to know what she's carrying. If she has documentation on the Harmon transactions. I don't, Reva said, steady voice, unsteady hands. I wiped everything. I have nothing. They don't know that. Straker was putting on his jacket. They know she saw the ledgers. They know she ran. From the outside, it looks like she went dark with evidence. He caught her eyes across the desk, which makes her a liability to them. Or an asset, Lev said quietly, if they can reach her before you've made clear she has nothing. The room reconfigured around those words. How many men can you pull? Straker said to Lev. 8 on the grounds, 12 more from the south side in 40 minutes. Do it. Straker came around the desk and stopped in front of Reva. He looked at her for a moment, that long, grey-eyed look that had undone her composure exactly once, 2 years ago, and had been undoing it in memory ever since. You're going to the lower level. Reinforced walls, independent power. Lev will take you. You're leaving. I need to handle this before it reaches the property. That's what they want. The words came faster than she'd planned. Straker, if someone positioned that camera today, they knew I was coming. They've been watching the gate. They wanted you to see this photo. She pressed her hand to her stomach. If you take your men out to chase a threat, the property is exposed. Straker looked at her. She had been very good at her job. She had spent 2 years reading numbers designed to be unreadable, identifying patterns in data that professional forensic accountants missed. She had learned, in that time, to see the structure of a maneuver before it completed. I can't keep you safe if I stay still, he said. You can't keep me safe if the house is empty. She held his eyes. Whatever this is, they know I'm here. They know what I came back carrying. She looked down at herself, the obvious, undeniable fact of it. They'll use it if you let them. A long moment, she counted her own heartbeats. "Lev," Straker said without breaking eye contact with her. "Keep the full detail on the perimeter. Nobody in or out without my direct authorization." He paused. "I'm not going anywhere." Lev made a sound that might have been surprise. He recovered quickly. "Yes, sir." The contraction woke her at 2 in the morning. Deep and grinding and different from the false labor she'd been managing for 6 weeks. Broader, more deliberate, tidal in its quality, not negotiable. Reva sat up in the unfamiliar bed in the room that smelled of cedar and something that was not her Savannah apartment, and knew. She was 32 weeks. The baby was not supposed to come for 3 more weeks. The baby had apparently not been informed of this. The second contraction came 11 minutes later, then 8, then 6. She did not panic. Panic, she had decided sometime in the 5th month, was a resource she couldn't afford, so she had stopped allocating to it. She reached for the phone Mrs. Grout had placed on the nightstand with strict instructions to call the first number if anything changed, and she called. Lev answered on the second ring. He arrived in under 4 minutes. She timed it. He took one look at her face and said, "How far apart?" 6 minutes, decreasing. He reached for his radio. The lower-level medical room had been designed for the other kind of emergency. Sutures and extraction, and things that needed to be handled without paper trails. It showed. Reva lay on a table that was functional rather than comfortable, and Dr. Beale, who had apparently not left the property at Straker's unspoken insistence, worked with the calm speed of someone who had managed unexpected situations before. Straker came in still wearing his jacket. He had not slept. He'd sat in the study all night with his men and his maps and his phone, not leaving, the way she'd asked him not to. He came in and saw her on the table, and came to stand at her side without being told to, without ceremony, without any of his usual strategic hesitation. He took her hand. She didn't pull away. She was 32 weeks. She was in active labor in a room that smelled of antiseptic. She was 3 years deep in a feeling she'd never named out loud, and she was done spending energy on things that didn't matter. "This is early," he said to Beale. "Stress and physical exertion can accelerate the process. She's progressing normally. The baby is in good position." Beale's voice was even and matter-of-fact. "We have what we need here. This is manageable." The heart condition will be addressed by the hospital team as soon as she's stable enough to transfer. Tonight, we focus on delivery. The stenosis is moderate. The baby is strong. A pause. So is the mother. Straker looked at Reva. "I'm all right," she said, because it was true in the ways that mattered. His thumb moved across her knuckles. Small and repetitive. The kind of thing you do when you can't say what you mean and your hands have to say it for you. She looked at the ceiling and breathed through the next contraction and let him hold on. The baby came at 4:17 in the morning with his father's dark coloring and his mother's absolute unwillingness to wait for convenient circumstances. Dr. Beale placed him on Reva's chest, small and furious, making a sound like a very serious complaint about the conditions of his arrival, and Reva pressed her lips to the top of his damp head and felt something in her chest reorganize itself around a new center of gravity. Straker sat on the edge of the table, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. He was looking at the baby, with the expression of a man who has just discovered that everything he thought he understood about himself requires revision. "He's healthy," Beale said. "Good lungs, good color. The valve will be monitored when we transfer, but from what I can see here, we're in a significantly better position than expected." She stepped back. "I'll arrange transport for morning." The door closed. The room was quiet. Through the building's walls she could hear, faintly, the sound of Biscayne Bay, Miami before dawn, the world going about its business without them. Straker reached out and touched the baby's hand, the tiny curled fist, fingers unfurling slowly at the contact. The grip closed around his father's index finger with the absolute conviction of someone who has not yet learned to doubt. Something moved through Straker's face that she suspected he would not have allowed if he'd known she was watching. I would have come for you, he said. If I'd known, I would have found you and... I know. She had known. That was in part why she had run and why she had come back. She looked at him, and he looked at her, over the head of the child between them, and she thought about all the things that would still have to be said. The real conversation, the long and difficult one, about Harmon and the ledgers and 7 months, and what kind of life it was possible to build in the shadow of everything he was. That conversation existed. It would happen. But not tonight. Tonight, there was only the weight of her son against her chest, and the sound of the bay, and the man beside her who was still holding the baby's finger with an expression of terrible, undefended love. His name, Straker said quietly. I've been calling him Cale, she said, in my head, for a while now. A pause, long enough to mean something. Cale Straker. She hadn't planned to give the baby Straker's name. She hadn't planned most of the past 7 months. Plans had a poor survival rate in this man's proximity. She was beginning to think that wasn't entirely a problem. Yes, she said, that. Outside, the first grey light of morning was beginning at the edges of the bay. The compound was quiet. The numbers woman had come back. She hadn't brought leverage or evidence or anything anyone needed to be afraid of. She'd just brought what was his.